Now that we all understand the Vietnam hospitality market, let's have a look at the Southeast Asia market. We now connecting with Ms. Fenady Uriarte from the Philippines. She is the business development from Updatea. Please have a look at the screen. We now connecting with Ms. Fenady.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nung, for the introduction. I'm not sure if you can see my slide now. Just prompt me if you can see my slide. I think it's there already. Right. It's great to be part of this conference. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be virtually present for this time. And what I'm here to do is to share you some regional market updates. So that includes Vietnam and the rest of the Southeast Asian region. Right. So before I give you the numbers, for those of you who are not familiar with STR, STR is part of the CoStar group of companies. We have been the leader of data benchmarking, and we have been doing this for over 35 years. So whether you're a hotel owner, hotel management, or even looking at investing at the hotel, we are the one who can probably help you with the data. So to give you a global perspective, so most of you here are probably asking, how is the hotel industry? So when we look at the global perspective into occupancy, so we have made 4 buckets of occupancy here. One is the red, the yellow, and also the greens. So generally, most of the markets as of 26th of September, the report that we have done is that most of the hotels are in less than 50% occupancy. Now, what is the movement of occupancy levels in Asia Pacific? Now, we're going to look at 2 points. One is in early February and another one is the early October. So based on our latest data. So this is a representation. So if we look at early February, majority of the Chinese market has been gripped with low occupancy. You're looking at less than 25% occupancy levels. But 8 months after, China is now looking much better. As you can see, they are now towards going to the green. That means they have over 50% going to 75% occupancy. But still, when we look at Asia Pacific, especially Southeast Asia, we are now looking at a very little demand. In fact, the occupancy buckets is really going below 25%. Now, of course, when we look at recovery, as Mauro has mentioned earlier, the arrow points to China. We're looking at now the occupancy for China is going back to about 2019 levels. And if we would compare that from June all the way to August, mainland China, first-tier cities, that means you got Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and also Shenzhen, and other cities, only the first-tier cities is still quite lagging as compared to the other major cities in China. Now, we need to get a little bit up close to the different regions in Asia Pacific to get a better sense of how our occupancy or how's the demand is. China, we already have mentioned that, they're working towards recovery. Japan and Korea, also, we have seen some green shoots. Pacific, also quite good, except that, you got some green, some red dots there, meaning those are for the Melbourne market where they have the closure. But Southeast Asia generally is on critical levels of occupancy. But this mainly driven, we got a Malaysian market, Vietnamese market, the Philippine market, and also the other parts of Indochina. Now, moving closer to the ASEAN. So we have 3 current levels here. So if we will break down ASEAN's occupancy from January all the way to September, so here at the lower portion, this includes the Indochina markets, including Myanmar. So we're looking around 15 to 20% occupancy levels. Now, the second current levels, we're looking at Philippines, Malaysia, and also Indonesia. We're seeing a little bit of growth there for Indonesia and also Malaysia. Malaysia is, in fact, one of the contenders now for a little bit of domestic growth because we have seen some growth into the regions. Now, for the Philippines, it's a little bit stagnant, still occupancy is around 30% levels. And, against all the ASEAN markets, we have seen that Singapore is still enjoying a 75% level of occupancy, mainly driven by the government support because majority of the hotels are also used as a quarantine facility. Now, how do we know if there are signs of development in your market? So when we look at benchmarking, we have pointed out that one of the 6 ways of finding out how benchmarking can support your recovery is really to look at the daily data. I would call it the dailies. So here, a representation of the daily data of the different ASEAN markets from August all the way to the end of September. Now, of course, we need to look at the heartbeat. We're looking at those heartbeats during the weekend. So now we are seeing signs of life, even, in some markets that occupancy is still very pressed. But on weekends, we are now seeing those growth, especially in those drive-by destinations. Now, speaking of drive-by destinations, when we look at Thailand, so we have compared Thailand over different markets, including a sub-market Hua Hin. Now, interestingly, with Hua Hin, which is about 2-3 hours away from Bangkok, the convenience of having that drive-by destination has really pushed the demand for that specific sub-market. Now we are seeing on weekends, they even reached up to 96% occupancy level. So that is good. However, those that markets whereby you need to fly still remains at challenging occupancy levels. Now let's go to Malaysia. As I mentioned earlier, Malaysia is one of a contender for domestic growth. We're seeing that because when we compare Johor Bahru, Melaka, all the way to Penang, so from the data from June all the way to the end of September, now we're really looking at the slow growth of occupancy. The winner here would be Melaka. We have seen that occupancy is reaching almost 60%. And well, Melaka is also about 2 to 3 hours away from Kuala Lumpur. Now, Penang is also growing. We have seen that Johor Bahru, which is further closer to Singapore, is also growing quite well in terms of occupancy levels towards the end of September. However, if you're looking at, is Malaysia out of the woods? No, it's still a long way to go. Just like as Mario has mentioned earlier, with so much uncertainty, even if we're seeing some growth in the Malaysian market, everyone is still not out of the woods, even for the rest of the ASEAN market. Now, let's look at Indonesia, where another market which is strong with domestics. So comparing Bandung, Medan, Bali, and Yogyakarta, now here, the 3 buckets for Bandung and Yogyakarta, we're really seeing that better performance for the locals. It's really driven by the locals. However, for Bali, which is really quite pressed in terms of occupancy because most of the hotels are closed as well, and they're also very heavily reliant on international tourism. Now, of course, when we look and compare with the different markets in Southeast Asia, looking at occupancy and just at this snippet of a time frame from September 26th compared to last year, occupancy is really down. We even looked at the rates. How are the rates? Interestingly, the Indochina market has kind of tried to keep the rates. So Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia has kind of limited the slowing down of the rates. However, if you look at Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, and even Singapore, we have seen big sacrifices on the rate. Of course, that is a strategy for those markets. And for example, Singapore, such a big drop in terms of ADR growth at that specific point in time in September, meaning because they have made sacrifices because most of the hotels are also used as a quarantine facility, meaning it is negotiated rates. Now, we're not really surprised when we looked at the profitability during restrictions and regulations. The RevPAR, if we would compare that at the same time as last year in September, majority are really down, hovering in negative 70 to 76% of drop in terms of RevPAR levels. Now, let's talk about the risk. Of course, everyone is looking at the demand levels. When is the demand coming in? When is travel coming in, or the borders going to open up? But there are so many things that you need to factor in, especially if you're budgeting or, looking at how are you going to do your strategies for next year, for 2021. But let me point out the other risks to consider, because you might forget to take this in consideration. There is a risk of new supply coming into the Vietnamese market. Of course, as Mauro has mentioned, there are deferred projects. But still, they are already in the pipeline. So this is a huge risk, and do not forget that Vietnam is one of the healthiest pipeline in the region. So these are your potential challenges if you are already operating a hotel. That means when this new supply come in, and then when the demand is coming in, so there's more pressures when it comes to going back to 2019 levels. Now, as a recap, what we have seen so far is really because a lot of borders are still closed, but there are some countries that are slowly opening, for example. But domestic is really driving, not only for China, but we have seen that for Indonesia and Malaysia. Especially for markets where there's a big domestic market, then that will be very helpful to drive and push more occupancy into your market. Now, of course, accessibility is a huge thing. Drive-by destinations are good because it's easier to drive rather than to fly. And do watch out for new supply, as I mentioned. Do factor them into your strategies for next year. Don't forget about them. Now, for recovery tools, what I can share you coming from a data company, please use available data in your market. And if you can look at the daily data, that's really, really good, so that you can compare between your weekend and also your weekdays. So in a nutshell, everyone in Asia Pacific are, struggling. We're not out of the woods, but it may be a long way to go. But we don't know. So hopefully when the borders are open and start to ease up, then we are going to see a much more better demand for hotel rooms. Thank you very much. And if you got questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Fenady. Just wait a second. Just wait for a second. I just want to ask if anybody in the room could have a question for you, because we're now connecting directly with her. If you have any question, Mauro?
The question is primarily, we have many of the countries which there is a third wave of COVID-19 currently coming along. What are the trends as of now featuring in these markets, and what are the future looking like?
Fenady, can you get a question?
The second question, what does the future look like? What's the first question again?
The first question is, there are many countries right now in Southeast Asia. Vietnam has been lucky, but there are phase 3 happening with COVID-19 there. So what is happening right now in these places, and how are we looking at the future there?
Okay, so one way to look at it, because there's still, a lot of restrictions on travel, and many countries are just working on their own. Even Thailand, for example, they're still very, very conservative before they allow international tourists to come in. They were in the news that they wanted to take in Chinese going to Phuket. But there's so many levels of restrictions, so many hassle for us to travel. So if we would even consider or entice people to travel, can you imagine they need to get COVID tests, they need to get some quarantine. And I think even for Thailand, if we look at Thailand, for them to be able to travel to Thailand is they need to even show 6 months of a bank statement. So if you would go to Singapore, you need to get, I think, they have opened some green lanes. So for example, for Australia and also for Vietnam. So I think there will be lesser restrictions, but still you need to get tested. So there's a lot of hassle. We have to wait for the vaccine, I guess, and then for people to be confident in traveling. Now, what's our expectation? I mean, what do we see in the future for the hospitality industry? Well, in some markets, we have created a forecast. Unfortunately, for Vietnam, yes, Vietnam, we have some data, but we can't create a forecast yet. We can customize something, but we're not, what is available currently is that for only key markets. We needed to get the data. We needed to get all those daily data. to be honest, some of the things that we are rolling out from the company so that we can impart more insights for you would be forward insights. But it's a slow process and we're doing it from market to market. And hopefully the next time we can share that over to you. But for me personally, I think we still have to be cautious, with all those lockdowns, and the situation is still very fragile. Just a few cases will probably bring in, another lockdown or restrictions in the market. So just be careful, and, safety obviously is key before we can really entice more demand for the hotel industry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fenady. Because we have time for one question. If anybody have over there, please, in the corner.
Hi, Fenady, very quick one. So far, the STR data which we refer to are historical. I do know that there's a forward star which is coming up, but what has been the response from the hotels? Because the forward star is not subscribed by other hotels, it doesn't make sense. So far you have been reaching out to a lot of hotels. What has been the response yet?
Okay, now that is, I'm very excited always to talk about the forward star. In other markets, for example, in Australia, it's already been rolled out. So we've even have seen, a very, the actual data for example, for Australian markets. For Southeast Asia, we're working on Bangkok. We're planning to open Bangkok, hopefully in the by next month or so. And then also for Singapore market. We would love to open for Vietnam market, but we need to get the support of all the hotels, because this will help you, because it will really give you your business on the books up to 365, your occupancy on the books up to 365 days. You're going to see your market demand and even cancellation. So for example, something happens and you immediately see a lot of cancellation. You can see the pickup report, showing some negative numbers. So it's really, really with the help of the hoteliers. So if you guys are also interested to get this open in Vietnam, we'll be happy to do this, but it works both ways. We can just create the report and show you all this without the support of the hotels, because the data submission needs to be done weekly.
Thanks.
Thank you, Fenady. Maury?
Yes, I have one more, Fenady. Can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Let's say I'm an hotel now, I want to capture the local market, I drop my rate by 50%. How long will it take me to get back there? Will be months, will be years? What's your best projection on the recovery of the rate?
Okay, well, at STR, we're not allowed to make comments on the strategies if you would do that. However, one of the benchmarking ways in order to arm yourself or get yourself an insight of how far you are against your competitors. So if you're dropping your rates, it's good to always have an insight of what your competitors are doing. So always look at the daily numbers, and from there, you check whether that is really enticing your guest or not. We can't really say that if you drop your rate, you're going to create demand. So it's hard to say. Coming from the learnings from Thailand about in 2015, they held on to the rates. There were a drop of occupancy because of their coup d'etat. They held on to the rates, but that's a different scenario. For a property, now we're on a different crisis. So always look at the daily data and do your strategies based on the numbers. You can always test, you can analyze. After doing that strategy, you implement and always do a cross-check if that works for you. And from there, that's how benchmarking can really help you and see if you're really close or beating your competitors.
Thank you very much, Fenady. Please stay safe and healthy. And I'll see you soon in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you. I miss you all. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.